actually by being lean and being frugal, you will add much more value to your company than when you're not. And it actually sets a really important precedence for your company throughout your entire journey, actually. And that'll be a continuous theme on just being frugal. So being frugal is stuff like, no, we don't want Microsoft Exchange. We're going to run everything on Gmail. No, we're not going to buy any software. We're going to open source everything. Just everything we could do not to spend a dollar, we would probably do that. I don't know if that was penny wise and pound foolish, but at the end of the day, it worked out. So I think I'll probably in the future tend to be penny wise again. So literally every dollar you don't spend is a dollar that comes back to your bottom line and adds to growth to your business and lets you go another month or whatever it takes to be. So then spare change is, we're continuing to work like crazy, and spare change is continuing to grow quite healthily. After about 6 months, we're actually able to hire some customer service reps, right? Until then, this is just like how you can be super scrappy. Our first customer service rep was named Amy. That's me. And it's all email customer service, right? And so we're like coding and answering emails at the same time, and Amy's this cute, bubbly little personality. And it was really funny because, it's really funny, so that's just kind of how you leverage the business in a way. I don't know if it's dishonest, but there it is. But it's funny because a lot of our customers who are app developers, right? They loved our service, right? We made a really simple service, it's easy for them to use, and it printed money, right? Which is great. That's what they loved. And they really liked it because Amy and the customer service team did a great job fielding all these questions. They're like sending her t-shirts and coffee mugs and thanks, Amy, and we love you and all this stuff, which is really kind of funny. And later on, we were eventually able to hire other customer service reps who replaced Amy. So anyways, just a lesson on being extremely frugal, and you just never know. So you just have to do these things, and sometimes you can appear larger than you actually are by doing little mechanisms like that. So then we grow the company. Company's doing well. We're actually at one point we're actually we're hiring. We're up to about a staff of about 10. We're profitable. We're cash flow positive. We had not taken any money, but we're starting to grow, and we're noticing that people are starting to notice us. Competitors are starting to notice us. We're seeing and that's the idea in anything of software. As soon as you develop something that's successful, people will copy it very, very quickly. And so we started to see copycats like crazy. I was saying at one point, little tiny micropayments companies were popping up like daisies, and they were, right? And that's when you start to get a little bit scared. And you're scared in one way because you know that, hey, we're this dodgy little team and we're working hard. We've got a first mover advantage. We know what we're doing, and so we've got a leg up on these guys, right? But then you take a look back at just humility and you realize, you know what? Yeah, but we're just 3 smart guys. That's it, right? And a number of engineers and customer service reps. There are other teams just like us. And there are other people who are just as smart, working just as hard. And you know what? Actually, there's a bunch of teams that are probably a lot younger too, so they might kick our ass because they don't have to go home and deal with the kids and stuff like that. So we're just aware of that as a business, right? So as a founder, you're kind of like half of you is growing the business, the other half of you is scared to death. And that's actually a really good place to be. I think it's very healthy. It doesn't feel like that at the time, but it's actually a very healthy place to be. It keeps you really tuned on what you're supposed to be doing, which is growing your business. So at some point, we reach a certain milestone. We get a really good article in TechCrunch with a bunch of numbers that we gave to TechCrunch. And that day that TechCrunch article comes out, we had every VC in Silicon Valley calling us. And actually, it was really hilarious, and it gave us some insight into how VC companies work. So, like Kleiner Perkins, I'd get a call at 8 o'clock in the morning from, "Hi, this is Bob at Kleiner Perkins, and we want to talk. Saw your article in TechCrunch, blah blah blah." And then at like 9 o'clock, "Hi, this is Sam at Kleiner Perkins. We want to talk, blah blah blah." And slightly different phone number, right? And then at 1 o'clock, there's another guy from Kleiner Perkins. "Hey, we should talk." Excuse me. And so three different people, 3 different phone numbers. And so, I'm returning calls, and so I call back the first guy, and I get his receptionist, Amy, right, whatever. And I'm like, oh, hey, Bob called me, I'm calling him back. Okay, take a message, all right. And then I pick up and I call the same number, and Amy picks up again, right, because they have kind of a shared office and a shared assistant and that sort of thing. I'm like, oh, I get it. So one of the insights from that in the VC pool is that, a VC like a Kleiner Perkins or like a Menlo or any of these companies, they're made up of individual partners, and they operate very independently, actually. So as you're going out and raising funding, just because you talk to one partner at one firm, you can talk to all 12 partners at the firm. They all have very different views and perspectives. So that's just one thing we learned in this process, is that the VCs, even though they might have one name on it, if you kind of scratch the paint on that a little bit, you'll discover lots of different personalities within that firm. And so as you go out and seek funding at some point, just because you talk to one person at a firm doesn't mean that you're locked out of that firm. It just means that you talk to one person. And you can find other partners within that firm that might have some background or might have some shared interest or some shared connection to try that angle. And then what's interesting is then when you approach that person, then the other partner will be like, oh, yeah, I've heard of those guys. And you get a little bit of instant secondary credibility, which is interesting. I'll give an example of one VC we talked to early on, and the guy was completely dismissive of the idea, and he thought it was horrible. That's okay, I respect that. And then it was one of his other partners that had called us after this TechCrunch article. And I'm like, oh, hey, Rob, and yeah, I talked to your other partner, Josh, like 6 months ago, and he thought it was a terrible idea. He's like, oh, well, let me call you back. And he calls back like 20 minutes later, and it's like, yeah, I talked to Josh. Yeah, he actually thought it was a really good idea. So, again, it's in the VC world, it's a lot about personalities. So we had an interesting choice to make. We were like, okay, so as a growing company, we realized actually we needed to grow faster, right? And again, this is bootstrapped, which means we didn't have a lot of capital, meaning none, which was really just kind of our cash flow from operations and money in the bank. So we really didn't have that, and we needed to grow our team aggressively. We needed to invest in marketing. We actually needed to spend money. We actually felt we needed to spend money to grow the business and to take it to the next level. And so we were really seriously considering taking venture capital. And as we were going through that process of talking to different VCs, one of the VCs said, hey, have you ever thought about maybe partnering with another firm in your space? And we're like, what does that mean? I mean, partner is, you do a deal or whatever like that. What does that mean? It's like, well, there's a company in your space that, actually may want to acquire you. And, and to be fair, actually, this was something we had not even thought about at that time. When we originally started the company, we thought, hey, let's grow this company up and maybe sell it to PayPal. That was my grandiose, vision. I didn't think it was an IPO-able company, but I thought it was certainly an acquisition candidate, which is a very important thing when you start a company. And some ideas, to have some idea of where you want to take it. You don't want to let that constrain yourself, because like you take a look at Facebook, there's lots and lots of examples out there when you start one idea and it just grows in a way that you have no dimension of it growing. That can happen. Companies are organic, and when things are organic, you just don't control the growth. The growth happens. You might steer it a little bit, but you don't know. It's interesting. I think there's a lot of parallels between like evolutionary biology and startup ecosystems, and so you just never know what the evolutionary biology is going to create. Frog or lizard or whatever. It just happens. I digress. So we started entertaining this conversations with this company called PlaySpan about an acquisition, and we thought that was interesting because at that stage, it was about growing the company, and we could take money, but PlaySpan was in the same space that we are in, right? At that point, we were doing micropayments on Facebook, and at that time, there was this other huge social network called MySpace, and this new one called Bebo, right? So very different dynamics, obviously, than today. But we were growing aggressively on all the social networks. We wanted to expand on Twitter and other places like that. And this other company, PlaySpan, was essentially doing the same thing. They had started about the same time we did, but they were doing it off of social networks. So they had done it in gaming and MMOs and kind of the more traditional gaming space. And they were growing into social networks. And so we're like, okay, so we've got a choice. Either we can take money and compete against these heavily funded companies, or we can actually join one of these heavily funded companies as part of an acquisition. Very, very tough call to make. You know, we talked to a number of advisors and a number of folks on how to do this. The best advice I actually got was from a guy named Bill Harris. I don't know if you know the name Bill Harris. He's one of the original CEOs of Intuit, a CEO of PayPal, really good financial services. He was on one of the boards of another startup I was on that failed. You'll have lots of failed companies in your history, just math. And he gave me some advice that we followed, and I still hold true to this day. He's like, Mark, in the business you're in, so we're in the payments business. He said, payments is a scale business. In payments, there are two prizes. You either win, right, and you get the prize, or you get second place, and you get the Setaginsu knives. And by the way, you don't get a Setaginsu knives. And so I thought that was really good advice. It was basically like, his advice was like, you know, I'm not telling you to sell the company, but it's better to scale the company. And so that was a choice we made. And they said, okay, let's start entertaining this acquisition offer more seriously, because it actually made strategic sense to sell and scale the company with another company than to continue growing independently. Very hard decision. I think it was genuinely one of the hardest decisions of my life, and actually all of our co-founders, it was a very hard decision. Because when you grow this something, like when you grow something from zero, it's, and I don't want to take too much credit for this, please, women, don't hate me for this, but it's the closest to what a man can do to giving birth, which is, I'm sure, very far, far away from that. But it's like, it's your baby, right? You put so much passion, so much time, and so much energy, and you love this thing. And so it's very hard to kind of give it away to someone else or to sell it. And so there's lots of parts to that. You know, one part is just, you know, kind of the emotional part. The second part is the cultural part, which is, you know, how do you connect with this other company, and does it work? The culture. The culture is so important. We had talked to actually a couple of companies that were interested in acquiring us, and PlaySpan happened to be like us. We went into their offices. We met with a couple of their key execs. Their offices sucked. There's like holes in the walls. You know, the phones, I think they stole. I mean, it was just like patched together. But it's like, you know, we saw some of the same elements that we did, right? The founders were very entrepreneurial. They're very scrappy. They're very money conscious, very bright, working late. You know, they're like, hey, can you meet us? And we're like, okay, great. And we're like, you know, we're working late here. How about 8:30 tonight? They're like, okay, fine. We're like, great, good sign. We went to another company, we're like 8 o'clock, they're like, no, we're all going home. We're like, okay, that's a good, you know, indicator. So very passionate group, kind of worked the same way we did. The other company just didn't, the culture vibe just wasn't there. They had kind of more of the, you know, class A offices, and it just wasn't there. And so culture, I think, is a really, really important part of that acquisition fit as well, too. And then there's a financials. The financials is this also is kind of part emotional. In any sort of M&A deal, it's going to be part cash, right? It's going to be part equity, just as a generalization. And some people are going to say take more cash. Some people are going to say take more equity. You know, at the time, people at that point, since PlaySpan was a non-public company, a startup, very well funded, you know, a lot of the advice was, hey, take as much cash as you can off the table, and, you know, certainly take some equity. You know, in retrospect, since PlaySpan was acquired subsequently, you know, obviously that may not have been, you know, it might have been better to take more equity at that point, but, you know, obviously these are just trade-off decisions that you have to make in your own mind on what you think is the probability of outcome. And it's hard to do. I'd like to say there's a beautiful mathematical equation behind it, but there's not. The one thing I can say is get other people who have been through M&A acquisitions before to help you with this and to help you evaluate this.